Good evening. Welcome to the January 21st, 2020 meeting of the Hamilton Planning Board. We'll be discussing the review of the open space and farmland preservation bylaw tonight. We will also be looking at our 2019 annual report and other board business, liaison reports, and minutes from our last meeting. So first thing on the agenda is the OSFPD bylaw review. We've asked, I know, Tom Ford and Peter Britton's here tonight, I think, to discuss this and get the input of developers on this. And we've had 2 or 3 meetings of our board to discuss potential changes to the bylaw and make it more appealing to developers and how best to do that. But we felt having actual developers would be helpful in getting their viewpoints. So I don't know if you have anything to add, Patrick, but
This was largely one of the outcomes from the master planning effort that we did with the consultant. We also did with quite a number of our local townsfolk. So one of the important things for us to do regarding our zoning bylaw is to look at specific kinds of overlays like this and residential development bylaws that we did not do as part of phase 1. So this is a small part of phase 2.
Great, thank you. So yeah, Tom, I know you've had the bylaw for a couple of weeks or so and you've reviewed it. If you just want to give us some general comments, that'd be great, or however you'd like to do it. And if you could.
I just have some notes. I have no ta-da moment, but I have plenty for you to think about. And
Could you go to the podium, please?
Oh,
Sorry.
Somebody left their glasses.
Oh.
Somebody, they were there.
They were there, yeah.
So I'm Tom Ford, 609 Bay Road, and I've done a number of little subdivisions in town and other towns. I am flattered that you are taking this up for review, and I applaud you for that. And I want to thank, in particular, Patrick, because without his kick, I wouldn't be here. But if you recall, long ago and far away, I spoke against the OSFPD bylaw in town meeting because I didn't think it would ever have any legs. And to my knowledge, and I reserve the right to be corrected, I don't think it has saved a single square foot of farmland or forest. But I think you have an extraordinary opportunity to widen the breadth of it. It had a great name, and I recall Joanne Patton speaking in favor of it. Any tool was a good tool and stuff, and I don't think it's a great idea, was crushed. I'm reminded of Barney Frank's comments when he left Congress. There are a few things in life that get better as you get older, but one of them is saying, "I told you so." I think that might be.
I'll have to remember that
Yeah.
Well, I know a few years ago you tried to use this bylaw for the property across the street, and it just couldn't make it work.
No, I think it was a variant of it, but it's a difficult bylaw, and it's 10 pages of toughness. Yeah. But what I would like you to consider if you're recasting it is you have an opportunity to not only save open space and farmland preservation, which is a laudable thing that we would all be in favor of, but I think a couple of concepts that Bill will be aware of and that I've talked about from this podium before, transfer of development rights, purchase of development rights, prioritization of what is important with respect to open space, which ones matter as opposed to which ones happen to pop up for sale. I think those are all opportunities, if you're really thinking about rewriting this bylaw, to purchase development rights so that your, near downtown parcel could go from 2-acre zoning to, half-acre zoning. I don't think you have to, how do I say this? To preserve little pockets of open space around a 12-lot subdivision is, in my mind, a little confusing because it's not public open space. It usually, to the extent there is a benefit, it relies with the abutters. But to actually purchase and write a check for development rights, you could end up with a very big kitty that you could lever with, you know, a green belt or somebody and get the right open space, not the one that happens to be at the table, but the right one, you know, and we could all identify them, the, you know, the ones that define us, you know, the Bay Road vistas and views, the Asbury vistas and views, the Highland, you know, I think we'd all come to that. And I believe there are a few people that have actually prioritized open space with a bigger view than mine. I'm being narrow about views and vistas, but you know, the ones that matter to the equestrian community, the ones that really matter to the, you know, endangered species committee and stuff. If we had a prioritized list of those, and we had spots that were on the outskirts of the, excuse me, downtown 20,000-foot zoning, I think there would be a way to change and diversify the housing stock, and at the exact same time, grow a very nice kitty for when the right parcel came available. I'm not entirely convinced, different conversation probably, that that the Open Space Trust in Hamilton is the right holding entity. I do believe Greenbelt has expertise here that we don't, and there are probably others. But if we had the first $500,000 to, you know, to buy the right parcel, I think we'd be well pleased. And I do believe that we have a real issue with respect to rateable and development in town. My brother still continues to do a very scattered, well-positioned, I think, you know, spec house for $1.5 million. But, you know, I would be interested in a retrospective look at what happened over on Patton. I think those 12 or 14 units that you may or may not like the look, but 14 units, it's, you know, 800,000, that's a very good rateable, and I don't believe it taxes our infrastructure. I think we should be doing a little more of that. And we always talk about affordable housing. I'm a little more concerned about the middle market housing, you know, $699 to $999 or something, and how we create that. And we can't do it on 2-acre lots. It doesn't happen. You know, it doesn't happen. So I hope you'll use this opportunity to think about transfer of development rights, paying for development rights, and housing diversity, because I think we could end up protecting the land that we really care about, as opposed to these little 3-acre perimeters, and we could end up with a slightly better rateable and a slightly more diverse housing stock.
Tom, some questions.
I was afraid of questions.
Really want to get your perspective on what we can do to improve this bylaw beyond purchase of development rights, and look at, well, really the key argument here is density. It didn't work for you last time, A, because it was overly complex, number one, and B, because it didn't offer any kind of density that would provide an economic benefit over and above what you were considering at the time. Is that an accurate statement?
Are we talking about on the hill?
Yeah.
are right there.
The hill.
The hill, no, that was a as of right development. There was no density bonus there.
No,
No, you-
I understand that. We, in conversations with you when you were coming before the planning board, encouraged you to look at the open space and farmland preservation development bylaw, which you did. And your summation to us was that it didn't offer any economic benefit above and beyond what you were already considering, besides it's being too complex. So what we're really about here is streamlining this and removing, we've already removed 5 pages of a spider's web of various requirements. The real key issue here is density, because without density, nobody's going to set aside 50% of a lot unless they can get some economic benefit in doing so.
No, but I would, here's where I would go with that. Had I had the energy and the wherewithal to do that across the street, the piece of land that I would be protecting would in fact be unique to the homeowners immediately adjacent to it. And I do believe there are pieces of property in town that are much more important than the back piece of my subdivision. So my proposal was, or my proposal would be, if I was talking about, what if I did 20 townhomes at the base of the hill, 12 single-family detached homes on 12 acres, and wrote a check for $1 million for you to go buy some more valuable open space. Open space that matters, the Bay Road open space or something.
Let's start with the first discussion point, which was your ability to build various types of housing.
Right.
And density, because you're not in the business unless you can make money, right?
Yes, but I've lived here for a long time, and we always talk about affordable housing and different, needs. Why do our policemen have to move off-site? Why do we? I'm looking at
Oh, the answer to that question.
we don't have diversity, especially with respect to new product,
Right.
right?
So, do you see any way of getting that?
Yes.
And how is that?
Yes. Allow people that look like me to increase the density. I do not believe that downtown neighborhoods in Hamilton are anything but a huge resource to us. Heather and I looked at moving down there. It's half acre lots that can accommodate a septic, being the real touch point, I guess. Create neighborhoods. We haven't created, I think the last one that happened was me, Plum Tree Court, decades ago, 4 lots. I do believe there are parcels that are zoned 1 acre or 2 acres now that would be amenable to that.
So what kind of density would you need to see on an acre of land to build what you call middle market housing in the $699 to $999 bracket? 3 units per acre?
Something like that. It's a more complex question than.
Now, so let's add into the equation that in that theoretical plot of land, you have to set aside 50% of that as open space.
Don't do that. Silly.
No, but that's where we are with this.
I'm
No,
making
no,
a very
don't.
credible case that that's a bad idea.
Well, no, but that's fine, and we could go anywhere with it. I'm not saying we can't, but I'm saying with the template we currently have, it was specifically the open space and preservation component was setting aside 50%, and if you did that, you got a density bonus to compensate you for setting aside that 50% of land that you couldn't build on. So what I'm trying to get at here, and I think what people would like to hear from you is, if we retained this template the way it is and had a theoretical piece of property and had to set aside 50% of it for open space, what kind of density would you need to, because you eliminated 50%, do you double the 3 to what you just told us? Or, I'm trying to get a sense of the economics here.
Well, truthfully, Rick, I think the piece that you get, pretend it's a 5-acre lot downtown and you want 2.5 acres back. I'm sure there's a number that works. My question to you as a board is, what is the value of 2.5 acres of isolated open space, uncared for, in the back of somebody's home? It's confusing to me. I'd rather do 8 units on that 5 acres and write you a check and say, go buy the right spot. Don't buy the backland, or don't, you know.
So, so you would build 8 units on what piece of size property?
Well, I don't know, I'm making it up
I
as
know,
I go.
but that's
you
what
know.
we're having, a theoretical.
I know, it's a hypothetical, but pretend we found a 5-acre parcel that was zoned incorrectly, you know, 40,000 feet, and you were amenable to looking at townhomes.
Yeah,
Townhomes.
that's what's in the bylaw.
Yeah, and I did 12 of them. And the as-of-right zoning was 1 house, and I was getting 12.
Right.
I think you'd be entitled to 11 times 100,000, and you put that in the piggy bank, you know, and say, the next time the right piece of open space, the one that we care about, comes up, we have $1.1 million to lever against whatever Greenbelt can do and somebody else can do, and buy the $5 million exactly right spot.
And therefore, you wouldn't retain any of that land as open?
Not announced, because I don't believe
No, I'm
that
just
has
kidding.
a value.
I'm
Right.
learning from you as you're talking.
Well, not announced, and, you know, reasonable people can disagree on what the value of open space is, but I believe that it's not all equally valued.
Okay.
Oh, that's absolutely true. I mean, I think there will be cases where, I think we talked about it last time, where you have a piece, whatever size, that part of that might be connected to other pieces of open space, right? So
Right.
that would be more
Right.
valuable.
Part
It
of
might,
a
it might not
network.
even be that visible, but it's connected,
Right.
right? So that's got some
Right.
value.
Well, we have an equestrian community, as has been reminded to me, in the network matters. A lot of subdivisions that Tim and I have developed have the network through it, and you got that for free, because it's 20 feet wide and it meanders, and who cares? But I do believe, the other thing that we're skipping over is diversity and rateable.
Well, no, because I think they're the same. If you get the density, you're gonna get the diversity, and you're gonna get, I think what you're telling, by rateable, you mean you're expanding your tax base.
Sorry, yeah,
It's the denominator.
right, right,
Okay, thank you.
right.
So,
But, so you get a triple. You have contribution for a future important purchase. You have a diversity of housing stock, which we're badly in need of, and you have the rateable. You have in the meantime, you have
right.
a few decades' worth of tax bills.
I mean, I do think, though, that, I mean, you kept saying downtown. There's not many 5-acre lots downtown, right? Or even 2 or 3 acre lots. So
Right.
I think we need to talk about the entire town.
Right.
And look at parcels that, okay, maybe they're Vista, you know, off whatever road it is.
Right.
The front part of that's really nice, and there might be woods in the back. Maybe that's where you develop something. I mean, so
And
it's all over the place. I think we have to talk about. It's just, you know.
I know,
So it's-
but I do know that there are some, I don't know, one-off parcels that are 5 acres that are, you know, on the edge of the downtown zoning. But a 20-acre parcel that is not, germane to the character of Hamilton, that could be 40 townhouses and write you a check for $5 million, I don't know why you'd want to skip over that. The trouble is, I have no idea, and I count on you guys, how you create a bylaw that speaks to that. What I think you do is you make it easy to propose and give yourself plenty of discretion to say no thank you. But make it easy to propose, because the reason this one died on the vine is it was horrific to propose, and the win was, arguable and minuscule. Yeah.
Yeah, no, well, we agree on that.
Right.
So we're trying to get rid of that. So now we're trying to figure out what form this should take to achieve the same goal.
Well, I
And
mean,
and maybe, and it may be that open space is not the piece that we want to deal with. I mean, that's nice to retain open space, but 85% of the town is already preserved in one form or another. So the rateable base that we have to deal with is relatively small, so.
well, if I was pretending to be on your side of the table, I would want to bring to town hall a proposal, or to town meeting, sorry, a proposal that would say, this is a mechanism for funding the purchase of the properties that we really care about. And the price we pay for that, to the extent there is a price, and, you'll forgive me, is that there will be some density clusters that will be considered around town. And frankly, we all pay the same tax rate, and I think diversity's been an issue, and tax rate's been an issue, and, we're not proposing to do a cluster of $2 million homes. We're proposing to do a cluster of 699s.
Okay.
Tom, excuse me, right at the beginning, when you started talking, you said there was some development that you did, was the last one?
Plum Tree Court, and it was long ago, far away. It was a little tiny pony paddock that my daughter rode in, that was tucked away off Plum Street, right in downtown. And it was...
In the trees area?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know where it is. You went in, you went to the left, you got way to the end, and you took another left, and there was this, okay, I know where you mean. Thank you.
And it was 4 lots, but it was a pony paddock that was, it had, 25 ponies on 4 acres, and, they were in mud up to there.
Yeah.
And I thought it was misplaced, and it was. And
So what did you do there?
I did a little baby cul-de-sac in 1, 2, 3 houses and one on the existing street, and that, long gone far away. Don't ask me, but 550s or something. I don't know, 550, 650. But that opportunity's gone away, because I worked inside the existing zoning,
Yeah.
and I found a piece that worked. But my proposal to you is, don't look inside the existing zoning, because you're not going to find it. A few of us have been looking, but find a 1 acre or 2 acre zone that is not a piece that's, character driven, and let something of scale happen, and use the dough from that, the exaction from that, to fund a really important purchase, not a goofy little strip around the perimeter.
Have you seen any bylaws similar to what you're describing in any other town?
Wenham. I think Wenham has something similar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is-
Truthfully, don't ask me to point you in the right direction. I think this is a very good idea, but I
Yeah.
don't know that I
They
have
have
the
a transfer
actual
development
solution.
right bylaw.
They have a TDR
I think so.
bylaw.
They do? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
A what bylaw, Pat?
Transfer
Transfer
development
development
rights.
rights bylaw. I'll copy it tomorrow and send out to everybody.
Thank you.
How would you set that rate or amount? Like you described, you build 12 townhomes, $100,000 a piece or whatever that goes back to the town. I mean, how does that?
Yeah, what's the value?
What's the equation there that makes that work? And it's got to be different for whatever type of housing you're doing, right? So,
So you do.
It does. I'd calc it on the units, and I'd be careful not to, remember who I am. I'd be careful not to market to market. I think you're trying to incent people to do this, because the 1, 2, 3 wins are real, right?
Oh, no, I totally agree.
Yeah.
It's just writing it down, right? How do you write it in such a way that it is enticing and that it is also, it's enticing for both?
Well, my question, I think, is the same as yours. Let's say you get your theoretical 5-acre lot, you put 12 units on, right? You were describing that earlier.
Yeah.
Where is the million, what's the equation, I think?
Yeah.
How did you get the $1 million out of that to transfer to the town for open space?
Well, I thought about it on a yellow piece of
You're
paper
pro- you're-
before I came here to talk to you, and thought 80, 100, some number like that would be a number that would incent me to come to you to say,
What's that 80 to 100? Is that the profit that's available from the
No.
density?
no, that's what I'd be well pleased to pay you for a density bonus. If I paid 100,000 per unit
Okay,
to you,
I got it.
and there's probably a more thoughtful number who can help you with that. That's what he does. But there's probably. But I would encourage you to keep that number in a place that incents it. If you believe in my concept, you want to incent it to happen. You don't want to make that number, well, this is the maximum available, and no one will ever take it. That's the issue with the piece of paper we have in front of us. A 20% bonus, given this arduous piece of approval, nobody took it.
Right. Well, I guess back to my question was, if you had different types of housing, like townhouses versus whatever, duplexes or whatever it was, singles, that you allow more density, is there a different formula for each one of those, I guess is the question.
Oh, that's an interesting, but my intuitive suggestion to you is leave yourself a lot of discretion. Don't try to think it out, and allow people that are on the other side of the table from you some room to innovate. I think there's a lot of good stuff happening in housing, and I think a little innovation wouldn't be a bad thing. And we see what's happening in Wenham with the rate, and Heather and I looked at a house the other day, and we're sort of put off by the fact that every morning that we wake up in this house, the tax bill will be a little over $100 a day. So
And it's going up.
and it's going up. And, there was we all have anecdotal stories about the flight to Manchester and stuff. I think we need diversity of base, and we need a diversity of housing stock, and you have an opportunity with the rework of this. The beauty of this always was Open Space and Farmland Preservation Bylaw. It's a beautiful title.
Yeah.
It's a
Was-
it's a
it was-
great name, yeah.
That's what was used to sell it.
Yeah, well, and it worked. And it certainly worked, because Joanne Patton stood up behind me after I don't think this will ever work, and said, I think any tool makes sense, and it passed unanimously. I
Tom,
skanked back to my seat.
if I hear you right, are you saying that it would be, instead of us saying what not the bonus, but the bonus to the town should be not open space, but let the developer come up with a number that for each specific project that he would be willing to donate to the town, that we could then put in reserve for another piece of property? Is that what?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're saying.
Yes.
That much
Yes.
flexibility.
And then yes. And then I
Then you
would
get
say,
large open space where you want it,
yes.
as opposed to open space where little developments are occurring.
Right. Whatever property happens to be in play, and whatever little piece of perimeter that I can carve off for you. But I would say, the other thing I would say is, maybe there's a floor. You say, not to be less than 75,000 per development unit, but per the discretion of the planning board. And just make the first step easy so people can take a pass at it and you can whack it down and, if you don't like the developer, you don't like the fee, you don't like the project, make the first step a little bit easy and
So you-
don't,
So you're recommending setting a floor on a fee number?
yes.
Okay. And you're,
I'm recommending it, haven't thought about it for 11 and a half seconds up here.
well, we're
Maybe a better way.
We're quoting you on town meeting floor. Okay, so that's very helpful.
Well, I hope that you'll junk this and use it as an opportunity to think about the three: diversity, protecting the right open space, and rateable, because you have a shot at get all three.
Yeah.
All of that, right, we
Sorry.
pool all of that.
I think if you made it like an either or, like
Fields.
50%
That's right, you get something everybody
Or-
can use.
the model you're suggesting where you pay for the transfer rights, do you think anyone would ever go for the 50% if the piece of land was lending itself to that?
I'm sure there's a parcel out there that makes sense, but, then you get into, wetlands are valuable. Do you want all the wetlands around the perimeter of the little subdivision? I do, and call that a win. That's confusing to me, why that would be a win.
Maybe we would make some sort of stipulation in that case that it can't be like a piece around the edge, like it would have to be.
I
Or
would
no, some
encourage,
sort
I
of-
would encourage you to read this, because that had a lot of that gobbledygook
Too
in
much,
it.
too much,
Too much.
restriction, yeah.
And frankly, I think what we should be doing is developing the land that is amenable to development and well-located, and preserving the land that we care about. The piece that I skipped over is if you're a owner of one of those lands that really matters to us, I think you should have the opportunity to sell the development rights. It happens all the time in tax planning, but what if somebody with the right piece of land came to me and said, I have 12 house lots as of right for the 100,000, I'll give you for $1.2 million, I'll let you buy those. And then I could take those 12 house lots and fly them around town and find a parcel that could, with planning board approval, accept a dozen other houses, but I put 12 more on top of it. You know what I mean? I think you would give landowners with the right parcel the opportunity to sell their development right. But I do believe in a town such as us, we need a diversity that isn't happening. We need a development activity that isn't happening, and we need preservation of the right parcels, not little pieces of crap.
No,
Is that a technical
Yeah, I
term?
mean, the one thing you said when you were looking at using this bylaw across the street was, how can I do a mix of different kinds of.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Right,
that was
whether it's
early on, right. Yeah,
I remember
Right,
those.
right.
Senior, townhouses, singles, whatever, and the bylaw didn't really allow for that so much, but, I don't know how we work that into something. I mean, this would be fairly easy, but, I know that was one thing you said was.
Problem is, this is prescriptive, and
Yeah,
it,
right.
and it, you'll forgive me, but it embodies the planning board to be not planners, but developers. I think what you really want to do is let the development community bring you ideas, shoot them down, kick them across, or embrace them, you know what I mean? But whatever you come up with, whether it's me or somebody else, or getting old, allow something innovative to come before you, and then with some discretion, embrace it, kick it to the curb, modify it,
Does the fact that it's a special permit deter potential people, given that you're at risk as opposed to
Yes.
a?
Yes. Yes, extraordinarily so, which is why I said, make sure the first step is easy. You know, make sure the first step is easy. Make sure it's something I can do with, you know, a $10,000 investment. You don't want me designing the road drainage infiltration system on the first blush, because you may have real issues with what I'm proposing, and it should die.
Can you describe what you just referred to as the $10,000 first step? You a little
I
more-
can tell you, I mean, it's.
I wish I was better prepared.
It's I mean, obviously you need a survey of the property, right? That's number one. And then it's you know, for me, what I would want to see, based on your model, is a bunch of concept sketches
Right.
and, you know, specs, but generally what those houses or units are gonna be, right?
Yeah.
Layouts, general layouts of that parcel. How many units, what kind of units, you know, what size units roughly, you know, and then at that point, you know, price point,
Right.
again, roughly. You could do 5 of those for not a lot of money, once you got the survey, you know, and come to the board and toss those around with us.
And wouldn't that be a great use of the board's time to look at a conceptual and some schematics and some?
Would you be in a position at that point to provide any kind of numbers for the development rights?
I think you would, because, you know, clearly you wouldn't drop the 10 or 15 that it would cost you to get here without having an idea that this was a viable
Because at that-
project, yeah.
Because at that point, you're negotiating density for, you know, whether it fits into this piece of property and, you know, so we'd have to, the planning board would have to know, well, what's the potential value back, you know, of that project that you're,
But inherent in your comment, Rick, was density's a bad thing.
no,
and-
I'm not, no, density is a good thing.
It's a good thing,
Yes.
on occasion.
Yes.
You know, in the right spot, it's a good thing.
Right, so all I'm asking is, let's say you came in on that theoretical 5 acre and you said, I want to do, I'm making this up,
All right.
20 units. And we'd say, okay, and you've got us a survey and you're telling us the kind of, and type of housing. We'd want to know, okay, so what's the potential value that the town might get in terms of funds for a future piece of open space? So I'm just asking, at that point, would you'd be able to come up with some rough numbers?
Well, I would, in my theoretical model, the incentives line up, because I would say, if I brought forward a project of 18 units, and I said, and I'm well pleased to pay you $80,000 per unit above the one that is as of right. So I owe you 17 times 80.
Got it.
And then you say, you know what? That's great. But there's this piece of land over here that could accommodate 3 more. Maybe we want another 240,000.
Okay.
You know, it would line up the incentives
I
on
got
some.
it. No, that's
Yeah.
what I wanted a vision of what you were thinking,
Well,
and you gave it to me.
and I do believe if you had a war chest of 2 million, you could lever that. I'm not saying that's all you have to, you know, you put that with some other resources. You look like you're trying to do the right thing. I've overstayed my welcome, but I'm appreciative of the
No,
time.
no,
Yeah.
very helpful.
Yeah.
If you overstated your welcome, we would have thrown you out. Thank you.
Did you have some comments, Peter, on this?
I'm going to come from a slightly different perspective.
Good.
Please.
Well, the more the better.
First of all, I want to do a disclaimer that I am not a developer, even though I am forced to think like a developer. Being a co-owner or owner in a family trust of 130 acres, 90 of which is under conservation restriction, which happens to be immediately proximate to the, I think it was 148 acres of patent land that just went to Greenbelt, with access all the way to Linebrook Road, really, if you were to follow the open space. And I want to give you the borrow of wanting to see a schematic. I have 4 copies of this that you can look at.
We can share it.
Conversion.
One per table.
What you see in red is the conservation restricted land. What you see in green is developable land. So
Let me go copy this.
what I am wrestling with, and the family is wrestling with, is
Can I take it for a minute? I'm gonna
how
copy
to
it.
do
Got it.
a couple of different things. One is to,
Okay.
we started off this whole exercise with my mother-in-law years ago, asking ourselves, where do we never want to see a house? And I think we've done a pretty good job of, if you walk our property, which is, by rules of Greenbelt that has the conservation restriction, come and take a walk. With the pieces that, so we started out with the question, where do we never want to see a house? And now, as we get a little longer in the tooth, the question is, who's going to manage all this? Who is trained, who is equipped to manage this open space? And are we going to follow the usual classic rules?
Excuse me for a second. This guy, the video guy, asked that everybody, please make sure you speak into the microphone, okay?
Okay. We're going to ask ourselves the question, classically, when you have things that are in trust, you wait till somebody dies before any kind of planning goes on, usually by people who have no training or no insight or any experience in some kind of meaningful contribution here. So in some ways I wear 2 hats. I'm a rabid agriculturalist and therefore want to preserve as much of the farmland as we've been able to create. There's an irony if you look at the 3.9 acre piece up at the edge of Asbury Street, which is kind of a funny shaped square-ish lot that's up near where Canterbrook would be. And actually, there's a copse of trees between this lot there. That used to be a copse of trees, which we cut down in order to make more hayland, which is hayed yearly by a farmer in Rowley who, crazily enough, has 300 head of dairy cows, which he feeds his cows with hay that's grown on our property. And that field is divided in half, where we have First Light Farm, it grows vegetables. So needless to say, those folks who live opposite the stone wall that we created with the open space that we have on Asbury Street have a pretty nice view. And one could say that there's some interesting value. I don't know quite what to put on that that little 3.9 acres, which is zoned for 1 acre zoning.
Which pieces are you referring to, Peter?
I'm sorry?
Peter, which pieces are you referring to?
Bottom right.
Just the green?
All in green, but the Asbury Street piece is this one here.
Okay, got it, thank you. It says Highland there, so that's why I was confused.
Well, sorry, that was a Meridian mistake.
Oh.
They're correcting that. We're in the process of trying to think this thing through. I mean, one alternative that we've actually looked at is my goodness, taking the design of the Grand Hotel at Mount Washington, reducing it a little bit, you could get 40 units on 2 acres. And wouldn't that make a lot of sense? You're not wasting a lot of space. You're able to have all kinds of economies. The misfortune in that is that zoning would only allow for this with a 40B, unless you guys were clever enough to figure some way to allow things or encourage things that don't take up such a large footprint. When I first looked at this particular little footprint, I said, I don't want to see another McMansion. And basically, the zoning that we have is for McMansions, which by my, I'm sure, quite uninformed assessment, millennials aren't going to buy any of these things. So the clever architect is one who's going to find a way in which he could subdivide these large houses, because they don't want to take care of the grounds, and they don't want that much of a footprint. So I said at the Housing Forum meeting, and I think I'm being consistent, that we're looking to come up with something that perhaps doesn't leave us doing exactly what Patton's did. Give us the best value on 50 acres of unrestricted land, and the remainder is unrestricted land, and the remainder is unrestricted. $4 million, with no attempt to look at any kind of development whatsoever on that. Just give us the money, and
Yeah. Well, I know.
just as long as it's not a marijuana farm. That's and it helped having a neighbor that was willing to put $2 million in. Okay. So one of the things I think about is, what about tiny houses? You know, I look at the downtown. When the downtown was started, way back when, what do you suppose the minimum square footage per house lot was? Or the average there? About 10,000 square feet?
Or maybe 5.
5.
I remember 5.
Okay. Maybe we should be going back to be looking at that kind of thing, where you had useful neighborhoods. In some ways, I curse the day that I pushed 2-acre zoning.
I wasn't going to bring it up.
Now, we pushed it because it would, the way we conceived of it, it would have allowed for a septic system and a well to be on a single lot.
Right.
And we were told by the DPW, you've got to provide water to everybody in the town. And that did it in.
What was the alternative, Peter, to your 2-acre lot? What did
1 acre.
1 acre?
They thought, as I understand, Peter, as I understand it, the idea was you didn't want to strain the town's water supply and pumping system, so the 2-acre zoning would allow people to have their own well. Was that
That's correct.
right? So that was before they understood they were pumping out of the same aquifer, so you weren't really
You weren't saving anything.
right.
Well, actually, I think that you were, because these are all bedrock wells, and we weren't doing the silliness that we're doing in pumping out of gravel-packed wells and over-pumping. The Patton well used to produce 500 gallons a minute of good water. Didn't help it at all that they had a valve open for 2 years between Hamilton and Ipswich. So I'm not altogether pleased with our progress on looking into alternative water supply. But, you know, I'm here to talk a little bit just because, you know, I'm a landowner. And I've got some resources here that I'd like to find a way to do something creative rather than, you know, just, you know, sell it off as a single lot and be done with it without any further thought. You way back when Peter was on the board, we first created cluster zoning. And we were faced with, we had the opportunity to buy the iron rail field, our half of the iron rail field. And it was owned by Drinkwater, the contractor at that time. And we came within bringing back and nullifying everyone but one right of first refusal. And because that person would not go for the cluster, it is a well-treated standard piece of subdivided land. So, it would be easy, and it may be a choice that we make to just do the patent route. I'm sure Greenbelt will probably be delighted to have that conversation, especially since they found that the main trail that runs from Asbury Street to the park doesn't belong to them, but belongs to us.
So, Peter,
Yes.
what Tom was describing, would that be a valuable tool for you?
Well, I mean, anything that's talking about more standard-sized units is gobbling up more land.
So townhouses or two families,
Or something even more outrageous.
you want tiny houses?
Well, either way, tiny houses, or we criticize the skyscraper in downtown Hamilton, but in terms of efficiency, it's efficient. And ironically, right next door, if you were to add up all the, and maybe just tighten up a little bit the boundaries between all those 23 condo units, there are different ways you could configure that so that you're not eating up so much open space, and you're providing some efficiency in terms of how a building actually functions when you think about it.
Yep.
So
Yeah,
that's,
And like you said, what most people think of, well, you didn't exactly say this, but what most people think of a 30 or 40 unit building isn't what you could have, like a really well done, like you said, mini hotel, beautiful building, isn't what most people think of as a 30 or 40 unit typical apartment building, right?
mhm.
You had something attractive, or a big barn looking building, whatever, that housed a ton of units, that could work, right?
I mean, painlessly, we use the bonding ability of the CPA to spend $6 million on open space. Do we have the same gumption to start spending some money on housing?
I'll tell you the answer to that. Obviously not.
So, I think that's a serious question for us to answer or ask is, and they had the vehicle. That's so maddening. To do that. What comparable vehicle other than going to town meeting hat in hand for, and I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just suggesting that, part of my, where do I never want to see a house keeps bumping into, I don't want to look at that 3.9 acres and see a sprawl of stuff. And the neighbors would be happy with that, I'm sure, and not very happy with what I propose or might propose, because it can only be done through 40B, and they don't.
Well, and like we've said before, no place where a 40B would happen of any size, none of those abutters would be happy. Nowhere in town is anyone going to be happy about it.
Mm-hmm.
But for the town, is something like that the right thing to do in a few spots?
Okay. So I don't know that I just wanted to give you a sense of what at least one landowner is doing, and all of these pieces are surveyed. We've had percolation tests done. I mean, we have a pretty good sense as to what it is that we're dealing with. We're just trying to create I think, a better balance and leave a contribution of some kind in housing so that somehow, without having to go to a 40B, we're able to do something for our seniors, do something for our workforce, do something for our veterans, and have something that's possible for the young people who went to high school here to come back and live in the community. And I'd be happy to put my head together with folks to think about how we can do. It almost sounds like it's the equivalent of R1 zoning, 40R, where you're able to create districts that I don't think our community is ready to look at a 40R. But is there something comparable that we can do that's outside that frame of reference where we have all the unknowns of the state, which scare people a lot? You know, we are very vulnerable because of our lack of diversity to just not know how for instance, a local preference thing with even the best lottery would turn out. So what can we privately put together that is clever? So, any other questions? I'm sorry I'm not coming as an experienced developer to talk to you. Now, if I can retrieve my plans there, unless somebody wants to hold on to one.
Thank you, Peter. I think,
Peter, I made a whole bunch of typos, so.
of course,
Oh, absolutely.
it's only 8 o'clock.
Well, you have two other real things on the agenda. So I had three little thoughts. First off, in all of your deliberations, never forget that we're a septic community, so that when I talk about townhomes, I immediately move that over into the condominium association. They're not freestanding. They're going to have a shared septic. And the same with any kind of density. I think you kind of immediately, once you get beyond a quarter-acre lot, you kind of move in the direction of a shared septic and that. And then with respect to the list, I believe there are a few people in town that have actually categorized and rated all of the discernible open space that is left. And if you were looking for places to spend money and stuff, that list exists. So, you know, 4 stars, 3 stars, 2 stars, and you don't look at 1 star or something, but you'd have an opportunity when those became available to spend the dough. And the other thing, and you guys are smarter on the politics than I am, but I would suggest to you that anything that I spoke about is separate and distinct from affordable housing, because I have no idea how to do that. The people from Harbor Light know how to do that, and they are very inventive at it. None of those things that I've spoken to, I think it should go to open space, and I think it would be the death knell of any changes to this bylaw to say this could fund affordable housing. It could, I guess, but I do believe that that's not what people want to do, is train density for affordable.
Right.
Well, anyway, thank you for letting me talk, and good luck with your deliberations. I hope you come to something.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
I mean, just in hearing all this, I was just thinking, you know, if we make this, you know, almost, I don't want to say undefined, but extremely flexible for a developer. Right, there's not even a whole lot of, you know, verbiage per se. If it's just so open, I know it's a special permit, but I always think, you know, getting this through town meeting, if if the discretion of this is left up to the planning board, you know, a lot of it is left up to the planning board to analyze, you know, plans that a developer brings, you know, how much, you know, faith will the community put in our hands on something like that, right? You know, at least the first time around at town meeting. So there's something else to think about. I mean, you know, some of these bylaws have passed because they're so tight, and there's not a lot of wiggle room in them. And if we go with something that has a ton of wiggle room in it, you know, how's that gonna fly? I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I'm just saying that's a.
I think Tom really, in some sense, agreed with that. He said that the bylaw as written is in some sense misplaced. It's too much in the weeds with too many details, and it's meant to apply to too many places that aren't really appropriate to have open space in terms of open space of value to town citizens as opposed to open space value to the surrounding neighbors. That was really valuable input.
Mm-hmm.
And I would propose that for the moment, we kind of table, you know, tweaking this bylaw for the spring meeting, take under advisement transfer of development right bylaws in other towns, and think about crafting something much more general like that, that winds up giving density bonuses in exchange for purchase of development rights otherwhere on town land that has or will be identified as being of high value for community-wide use as open space. And I think we'd be better off spending our time thinking about that.
And you know, a lot of his arguments made total sense, and I tend to agree that, you know, I would rather have a more open and flexible bylaw that allowed for who knows what. I shouldn't say it that way, but allows for much more innovation and different things happening on different parcels based on the parcel itself, and, you know, what makes sense where, you know, versus us trying to dictate that. But yeah, it would be nice to see. I haven't looked at Wenham's TOD bylaw.
Are you on listserv?
No.
Yeah, that'd be nice to, maybe MAPC might be able to help us with some sample bylaws.
Yeah, we can do that. While we were talking a while ago as well, I did email town council and asked her for a TDR bylaw that she's familiar with that might work for us.
What is TDR, Patrick?
Well, the
Transfer of development rights.
What Tom was talking about. Yeah, no, I agree with Bill, because I think we're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, or a round hole into a whatever, square peg.
I mean, Peter was just talking about some of his land might be perfect candidate for transfer of development rights,
Yeah.
possibly.
So the other thing, I think you're right, we're going to have to think about this later on, but sort of three things hit me talking to Peter or listening to Peter and Tom, is one, and they're talking about housing, is housing diversity, and Laura said innovation, and I think that's right. Financially accessible housing, Tom was talking about at $6.99 to $9.99. Expand the tax base, and then contributions to open space are sort of key issues that I picked up as themes that we might want to work around in terms of evaluating. In terms of the financial aspects back to the town, and you're right, politically, there's a great deal of suspicion of the planning board and government in general. And past bylaws were written so that they were extremely prescriptive and restrictive, and that's why this one was never used. I'm just thinking out loud here in terms of development rights, monies that may come back to the town under some version of this, is it doesn't have to all go to open space. What we're really faced in this town, and it's going to become very painfully aware in the next budget cycle and future budget cycles, is the schools are asking for a 13% increase in their budget, which means if we go that route, we're going to be in override territory. And for those of you who lived through the early 2000s, the late 90s and early 2000s, we had 10 overrides in a row before the two towns revolted. And so we also have a Capcom committee that's going to probably come up with, do we know what that number is yet?
Don't know.
No. Tens of millions of dollars of capital. If you look at our streets, they're falling apart. We've got water system that needs work. We've got all sorts of, and the schools are going to be looking for monies for. So I'm just thinking there's going to be an immense pressure on the body politic, and I'm thinking if we were to do something as Tom proposed, is that money could go to open space, it could go to affordable housing, it could go to, and I'm just saying this out loud, it could go to some school building fund, or it could go to the general fund.
That's like, in other states, you have development impact fees.
Right.
And a lot of development impact fees go precisely to do that. The existing infrastructure in the town is built 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's all been paid off. But then when new development and large scale occurs, you're looking at costs of infrastructure that are 10 times what they were back then.
Right.
And they use it for supplying infrastructure.
So
one of which would be schools.
Right. So I just don't want to think just open space is, and I'm just saying that politically because if you make it broad enough, gee, the schools get a piece, the affordable housing gets a piece, the open space gets a piece, people are going to say, okay, so this might have a broad-based benefit as opposed to just.
That's another thing to ask the town council. Development impact fees, are they allowed in Massachusetts?
Absolutely.
Okay. Some little summary of that as another thing to do. And, you could see developers easily being willing to ante up money to improve the town's infrastructure in exchange for a density bonus.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to ask you also, Patrick, did you make any progress on this idea about looking at the impact on school attendance from recent developments? Remember we had it?
I have been asking the wrong people.
Okay.
But I have the full 46 respective homes that have been built in the last 5 years. So all I need to do now is to find out what the population happens to be in those units. So
You need to benchmark it against the existing population.
Yeah.
So knowing that there were, let's say, 1 or 2, children per new home, we do have to compare it to existing homes in the same size. So that might not be quite enough to do the study correctly. You'd want to be able to benchmark the new homes against existing homes. So,
yeah, we have that information for existing homes, but I don't think that I have the ability to separate out this past 5 years worth. Yeah, if we use the census information.
but we can get that from the assessor's office. So if we just know the address of all the school attendees, regardless of grade, the assessor can say whether any of those houses, which one of those houses was sold in the last 5 years.
Right.
And we'll get the same piece of data. And which was sold 10 years ago, and, how big a house it is, whatever else you want to know. You can merge the two.
Okay.
So you want a list of every family that's in the schools, essentially?
Yeah, how many kids? Actually, I don't even need to know the family, but the address. Three
Well, yeah,
Three
right.
students from
Right.
180 Bridge Street, 2 students from whatever.
Okay, fearless leader, what do we do next?
Was it, do we have any more comments on the bylaw, or are we good there? We're gonna-
So it sounds like we are starting from scratch.
Yeah, I would propose we kind of take a step back on this.
Let me just throw this into the discussion. If we're going to town meeting with something, and we kind of sound like we're pretty diluted now and kind of all over the place.
Diluted?
Doesn't sound like we're going to be ready for this town meeting. The warrant will likely be closing mid-February, which is, gives us basically one meeting.
It's pretty early.
Yeah.
I
So-
would like to make a proposal.
So what, hold on one second, what do we have to do before that warrant closes?
Well-
If we do anything?
What we would need to do is formally notify the town manager and the clerk and the Board of Selectmen that we're pursuing a zoning bylaw. It is titled X and it does Y. And that way they create a placeholder on the warrant.
Okay, so as long as that placeholder is there, you can still do hearings and whatnot well
Yep.
after that, yeah.
Yes.
That needs to be done before, for this coming town meeting, or gonna
Yeah.
be done for next,
If we want to bring some bylaw change, we have to know what it is by mid-February.
right.
Right.
And then we, you can hold, you still have whatever amount of time to hold
We
the
can
hearing.
draft it after that, or the particulars, right.
Right, and hold your hearings, yeah. 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 Because when is town meeting this year?
That is April, I believe that's the 2nd.
Very early.
April the 4th, rather.
Okay.
Yeah, first Saturday in April.
That means we would have to have the draft ready and hearings held by April 4th?
Yeah, you'd have to.
Oh, you have to have it before that, I mean,
Oh, way before that.
yeah.
You think this,
Yeah, February and March, basically, to do it, or part of March.
I don't.
We're not getting
I don't
anything
see-
done.
I don't see it getting done.
No.
Well, yeah, no. Well, obviously, not
But-
doing a whole new bylaw, no.
Yeah, what we're discussing, it would have such large ramifications. It needs a long gestation period for public discussions and input and
Refinement.
refinement.
Yeah.
So the longer, the better, actually. And it definitely should go to not the fall town meeting. In fact, I'm going to be advocating to the Board of Selectmen there be no fall town meeting because it's really a waste of time. I mean, they can barely get people to go, to get 70 people. And it's really, it's this legacy thing. Well, we always have one. Well, okay, but why?
Because we always have one. I mean, it's obvious.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, you're right.
And you want the broadest possible participation on this kind of
I
bylaw.
can see it could easily take a year for this thing to get developed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, I mean, if you're doing something that's out of the box and completely new, and a year isn't out of the question to
Yeah.
get everybody get as many people as you can informed and have a number of hearings throughout the year and things
You
will
get the,
change.
you get the zoning board, the Board of Selectmen, the finance committee, the school committee, I mean, you gotta hit everybody.
I think your point is very well taken, too. If what is gonna hit the fan because of the town budget, then everything we do
Mhm.
is gonna be looked at in that context.
Mm-hmm.
And
Which is perfect.
And it may behoove us to wait a little to see exactly how bad this is gonna get.
There's nothing like a good crisis to create an opportunity.
Well, I think, the school budget's gonna go up, but I doubt it's gonna be 13% by the time it's all said and done, because they know that's not gonna fly. That was just their first pass, but
Right. Hey,
yeah, who knows? Who knows?
the fact that they're even asking for that shows there's some significant,
Oh, but it's one of those, like, let's start way up here and we'll whittle it down and we'll get to kind of what we really need and what.
I just remember the override times. The school committee thinks, and I'm not saying that it is the same this time around, but the last time around, it was, we're a regional school system, we don't really have to listen to you. And it turned into a war. And, you know, the two finance committees, the two boards of selectmen, and then there was the birth of Enough is Enough. And then they forced an operational audit that found $14 million in savings. And the schools just fought it tooth and nail. I'm not saying that's the case here, hopefully it's not, but sometimes it just, you know, they're.
Aging demographics are gonna play a role this time, too. There's a lot of discussion nationwide about, you know, why do old people want to spend money on school? basically.
Well, the interesting thing is that,
And,
the interesting thing is that 70% of the population at any given time doesn't have any kids in the school system. So I always thought it was much higher, but it's not. So you really have 30% of the population driving,
100% of the school costs.
yeah, which is 70% of our budget. So it's all, always inverse.
Well, maybe all us old folks should go back to school.
Anyway, that all to be seen and worked out, and hopefully it isn't that amount. But there's going to be some strong discussions.
We haven't had an override in what?
Since 2008. I think it was 2008.
Pretty good run.
Yeah, no, I mean, and Wenham is already, you know.
They had one last year.
Yeah, they're already there, so the pressure is building.
Okay. Do you want to review the annual report? What's next up? I mean, I've read it, it's pretty thorough. A couple of,
We have Rick to thank for this, right?
Sort of.
So you're the keeper of the records.
Yeah, more or less.
there's just a couple little typo things, but I mean, I can show them to you instead of you. That I found, I think 3. I can just show them to you and versus reviewing them, but.
Sure.
There's, yeah, just on here.
Or just do a spell check.
No, it wasn't even that. It was more like just the phrasing and
Oh, okay.
just an additional 2 or an additional A or whatever. You know, that kind of thing.
So, is the board ready to vote?
I am. I was just about to ask if anybody had any other comments on it.
Okay.
So, making a motion to approve the 2019 annual report.
Second?
Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Richard and Patrick, for putting that together.
You're welcome.
Meeting minutes from the 7th, January 7th. Oh, I'm sorry, we have December 17th as well. Wait a minute.
There's only one in here.
Oh, you know what? That was my old one. Yeah. The 7th. I was okay with them.
I wasn't here.
Right.
I make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes of January 7th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Any other board business or liaison reports?
Open Space Committee's moving right along right now. We're working on goals. We've got a decent draft, at least for the time being, for where we're at. And I'm gonna, the guy from MAPC is, I think he's in town to do it on other business for the town, but he's gonna come to our meeting Thursday. He should be pretty far along, because he thought he could be done by the end of January. And I've talked to, gotten suggestions and information from the Wenham Open Space Committee Chair, from, this off the top of my head, and from about 3 other people. Let's see, CPC had comments, because pretty much everything in the goals is gonna need some kind of funding, and our suggestion is probably gonna be CPC funds and/or grants of some kind. Keep it off the tax base, whatever we suggest. One of the big things seems to be turf fields. The Rec Commission Chair says that turf fields are his #1 agenda, or their committee's #1 agenda.
Well, add $9 million to the,
Yes.
and that was,
Not to add that, again, CPC money and grant money, which, and then to remind you, once we have the draft of the open space plan with the goals and everything set, and that draft gets okayed, not completely finalized, but just okayed by the state, the town can start working for grants that now become available because we have that.
Yep.
So I don't know how long the state takes for their first step, but I gotta guess within a year, hopefully a lot less than a year. I'll start using that.
Great. Thank you. Anything else? All right.
Turf count as open space?
Huh?
Yes, turf.
Does turf count as open space? Nothing.
Yes, because it's recreation.
Oh, yeah.
Comes under
Open space and recreation. Doesn't count as open space, but
Right.
it's right.
I can't go there with my neighbors and play football, can I? I think
Potentially.
it's school fields.
You might have to,
It's
you might have to pretend you're a little
you can
younger
use the
than
high
you
school
are,
field.
but yeah, you could.
Yeah.
Actually, they'd probably be the football field for years and years and years. Major drainage problem, major problem.
Motion to adjourn?
second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
A lot of students.
That's interesting. That was
Sort of San Antonio, Washington.
having the other
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah,
I'm
thank
glad
you.
we did that.
Guys buy up.
Yeah, no, it's definitely useful.
It shifted our mindset.
Yeah, but